an American American in Paris on Paris.
An American on Paris.
On Paris.
We were on Paris.
Don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. It don't mean a thing. All you gotta do is sing.
Awesome. So we are here with Kirsten and Matthew Scott, two of my favorite humans. You both have been on the Broadway. A few of your credits. Kirsten, you are currently doing Rock of Ages, not including quarantine, obviously.
Exactly.
You've both done Jersey Boys, and Matthew, you just recently finished your run in Grand Horizons on Broadway, which is awesome. And you've also done Jersey Boys on Broadway, American Paris on tour, all the fun stuff. So first, I want to know how you guys started in theater. How you guys got into this lovely business.
You want to go first?
Sure. So I grew up in New Jersey, only about 30 minutes outside of the city, and I've told this story a lot in many different iterations, so I'll keep it short. But I was a kid who did not like the noise of the lunchroom when I was in middle school, when I was younger. And I very distinctly remember going to the lunchroom one day, and it kind of freaked me out because it was so loud and there was just a lot going on. And it was very off-putting to me. And I've come to realize later that it's probably very much a part of the anxiety that I would then deal with later on in life and try and get a handle on. But when you're a kid, you get put into these uncomfortable, nervous situations, and we now as adults recognize little kids when they're freaking out and we're like, oh my God. But when we were kids, I don't think parents thought we had anxiety about anything. They were just or we held it in and we didn't really tell an adult or anybody. But I realize now that the lunchroom presented a lot of anxiety for me. So I decided to turn around on my heels, and I walked up the corridor, and the door to the music room was open, and the music teacher was inside, and I said, can I sit in here and eat my lunch? And he said, okay. He was putting books on a shelf, and the lunch period was up, and I left. And then the next day I went right to the music room again. I said, can I sit here again? He said, sure. And he was playing some music on the stereo, and I said, oh, I know who that is. That's Michael Feinstein. And he's singing Gershwin. And he's like, yeah. And I was probably, 11 or so, 10 or 11. And he said, yeah, come over to the piano. Do you know how it goes? And he started to play, and I started to sing. And that's when I started every day until I graduated middle school, went to high school. I would go to the lunchroom and sing instead. So I started singing very early on. And what I realized later was that, because the fear of the lunchroom, because of the anxiety of those situations, music actually was the thing that kind of balanced me and gave me reason to feel calm and kind of in control. And so I just started singing a lot when I was a kid. And then when I went to high school, I was very lucky all my life. I had great teachers every step of the way, middle school, high school, college, every step of the way. And my parents were both teachers. But when I went to high school, I didn't know much about theater. I'd done the plays in middle school, but I went and saw the show at the high school when I was a freshman, and they were doing West Side Story, and I was like, this is incredible. And it really was. We had an amazing teacher, an amazing program. And so I started to get into the musicals in a much more serious way. And it was that teacher, John Housley, who was like, you need to look at this in college. And I was like, what? That's such a weird, people go to college for this? And so I really was kind of, aside from the fact that I sang a lot and I was a good singer and I sang at restaurants, and made money at parties and weddings and things, which I did. Aside from that, I was pretty directionless in terms of what a career in the theater would be. So thankfully to John, he kind of was like, there's a school called Carnegie Mellon, and you should look at it. It's in Pittsburgh. And I was like, I don't want to go to school in Ohio. And he was like, okay, well, your geography sucks, and you should maybe think about doing something other than geography, clearly. So he really helped me, and then of course when I went to Carnegie Mellon, everything was elevated. I was at one of the best schools in the country, and that's where I met her. That's, believe it or not, was the truncated version of that story.
I also was not a fan of the lunchroom. The lunchroom was terrifying.
That's going to be the title of our autobiographies.
I mean, that's
Fear
not
of the
like
lunchroom.
how I found theater. I found it first, and then, but there is some real fear of the lunchroom. It was in high school. In middle school, like everything was like copacetic, and I was like cool and like fine. But then like when it got to high school, it was just like everything changed, and it was so much scarier. I don't know what it was. I think I also probably dealt with anxiety or had anxiety and just dealt with it differently. But I found theater in kind of like a roundabout way. Well, first of all, growing up, my dad traveled a lot, and he really liked to go see musicals. So when he would travel, he would go to London a lot. And he would always bring back like the cast albums from the shows he saw. And so he, of course, at that time it was like the 80s, and he went and saw like Phantom of the Opera and Starlight Express because Angela Weber like ruled Broadway and the West End at that point. So he'd bring back these soundtracks and then play them in his car. And so just growing up as a family, we would like sing along to like musical soundtracks because we were cool and that's what you did. So when we took lots of road trips as families, and like my whole family just loved musicals. We were like, this is just cool. And I was a dancer growing up. My mom was a dancer, and so she put me in dance class when I was like 5. And I kept with it. And then one summer, a good friend of mine, I was like 13, and she was going to go to like a theater camp. And she's like, you should go. And I was like, cool, let's do this. Her uncle happened to run it, so she's like, yeah, I'm gonna try this thing. So I did it, and I had no idea what I was doing. Like I remember I took like a fake book to sing Part of Your World from like The Little Mermaid, and it was like it didn't have like the chords. The poor pianist was just like, this is a fake book. Yeah, just like, and I'd only of course sang along to like the soundtrack, and I was 13, and I had no idea what I was doing, but like I loved to sing, and my parents thought I was kind of like I was a very hyperactive child, so they're like, please, anything to like get her out of the house all summer. And I guess I was good at it, and I booked like a part, like one of the leads, and I was like, oh, and it was just fun. And then I just kept going back to summer theater camp, and like the whole year I would just look forward to going to camp and going to theater camp where we'd take classes during the day and then rehearse a show and then perform a show, and we got costumes. It was really cool. We got to perform at like a little community theater here in Pittsburgh, and it was really magical. And then high school happened, and then I started to become like laser beam focused, and I was like, you know what, this is what I want to do with my life. Because I think also like with the lunchroom, I was like an awkward child, and I didn't quite know how to live in my own skin. But something about being able to jump into someone else's skin and being on stage, I felt most at home, and I felt like most like myself. Because I was kind of like a lonely child, and I would disappear up in my room, and I would just disappear into cast albums for hours and hours at a time, and that was my jam. And so I found this thing that kind of linked. It made me feel like I was, I don't know, like I felt confident. I just felt home on stage. So that's kind of how I found my way there. And then, I auditioned for a bunch of colleges, and I got into some of my dream schools, and I ended up choosing Carnegie Mellon, and luckily found this guy.
She got into this is unheard of, but how many schools did you actually audition for?
I think 7.
Oh, I thought it was more than that.
I think 7. Oh. I didn't end up auditioning for some. I was going to audition for like 10, but then I only auditioned for I think 7.
And nowadays, like when we're teaching coaching kids, we tell them that for men they should audition anywhere from 10 to 12, and women should audition from anywhere up to 20 programs because, well, one, there are more programs than there were when we went to college.
Yeah.
And 2, it's a lot more competitive. We often joke, and we're like, we probably wouldn't get in the Carnegie Mellon today if we auditioned. We probably wouldn't. And I know a lot of people who went to that school feel like they're like, I wouldn't have gotten in today. So now the number has to be a lot higher just because the odds are a lot, greater. But Kirsten at the time got into every program she auditioned for, which is pretty unheard of. And they were including, the top ones. So
I got lucky. But
you didn't get lucky. Whatever.
But I almost I was debating between NYU, Cincinnati, and Carnegie Mellon, and I'm really glad, obviously, I chose Carnegie Mellon. I just didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go there because it was literally like in my backyard. My dad had gone there for grad school. And so like he knew the school like the back of his hand. My parents it was too close to home. But then I went there and visited again because I went to pre-club there as well. And I was like, you know what? This is just, it feels right. And clearly it was the right choice.
All right, well, you kind of answered my second question. But adding on to that, the question was, what does theater mean to you, and why do you feel it's important? And you both mentioned that it kind of felt like a home to you. It was where you felt comfortable. But especially right now, where we are with the pandemic and everything that's happening, what is theater to you right now?
Can I go?
Yeah.
I think never is theater more important than this current moment, because I think theater above all teaches empathy, which I think is a really important tool that unfortunately a lot of kids can grow up and somehow not learn or not inherit. When I did Ragtime a couple years ago at the Algonquin Playhouse, we were doing the show, and the Charlottesville happened, and the woman was killed, and those horrible, that horrible protest and kind of counter riots happened. And we all as a cast took a moment and said, if this show didn't already mean so much to us, now we are even more charged to tell the story to, quite frankly, a bunch of very wealthy white people and say, hey, look at this story and look how history hasn't changed. You think that you're watching something going, oh gosh, that was turn of the century. That's 1900s. We're now in 2018. Like that could never happen again. And it was so interesting to watch the audience kind of, especially after that had happened, change and actually become in a weird way, like more moved. And we were like, oh, we're really good tonight. But I think it was in the back of their minds, they knew that this event had just happened in our country. And they're now watching a show that is somewhat mirroring the events that just happened, and they're putting the connections together, and they're making the connections and going, oh my gosh, we think that we've progressed so much and nothing has changed. Things have changed, but not in the grand things that need to change. And I really think that if you can change one person's mind in that theater, or make them see themselves in a character and realize that maybe the next time they pass someone on the street that they would normally judge, that they can have a little ounce of like empathy or awareness that their walk of life is so different, and maybe to think twice about their actions, the things they say. Words have such power. So I really think theater, gosh, when it comes back, is going to be so well received, because I think people just need to go and feel things and get that, have that mirror held up against them and see that everyone's not so different. Yeah. Anything?
Well,
the mascot?
Yeah. I mean, I know you've heard me say this, Claire, like in a classroom or rehearsal before, but I like maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I can't remember, but I was doing a show at the Kennedy Center with our friend Heidi Blickenstaff, and we were backstage in a moment where I guess for some reason Heidi and I were just kind of crossing backstage while there was another group on stage performing, and she grabbed me and looked me in the eyes and was like, we're the weirdos, and that's a good thing. And I say this all the time, and I know you've heard me say this, that we're the weirdos, and like, let's own that and not be embarrassed by that. It's not a bad word. It's a really good word. And I think for so many kids who are trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in, theater is that piece of the puzzle, even if they don't wind up pursuing it on a large scale or becoming the star they dreamed of when they were singing in their, toothbrush in their bathroom. It's like, it's not about that. It's about, to tie into what Kirsten's saying, it's about the empathy it teaches. It's about the community that it brings. And, there's no greater example than like today when I'm looking on my Instagram feed and seeing it flooded with pictures of Nick Cordero, who frankly many people didn't know personally, but the community that rose up around, him and Amanda and and their baby during this time was overwhelming. Kirsten did do Follies with Amanda, both in DC and on Broadway, and she is everything you've seen her be on an interview or on her Instagram. She is grace, and she's optimism, and she's positivity, and I don't know how she does it, frankly. But I have to believe that the community around her that has been lifting them up for the past several months is a large part of the reason she's been able to do that. And that community, that doesn't exist in any other profession. And so when I think of, New York right now, and I think of theater, not just Broadway, really, theater in general, I think of, the community that is instantly forged, the friendships and the eternal bonds that come out of working in this business. And that is hands down the thing I miss the most, is being able to be in a room with people and create and support them and laugh with them and hug them and, watch somebody figure something out, watch a kid or another actor, have a light bulb moment, or for you to have the light bulb moment, and for everyone to be a part of that and take joy in that. That's the best part of it. And theater doesn't happen without every other single person in the room. And there are a lot of perfections in this world, and there are a lot of things in this world where it doesn't matter if you're operating on your part by over there in your cubicle and you're doing your part, and we're going to have a meeting at the end of the day and you're going to switch reports. That's not how this works.
I mean, we're surrounded by a family right now, and everyone, my whole family at one point was in this house, and everyone was on their laptops holding their own, doing
different
their own
corners of the house. We're down the basement. He's upstairs.
Yeah.
Her father's over there. Her sister's over
running
there.
a business, doing all their different things. And Matt and I feel, I've been feeling like I'm walking through this house just like a ghost because we can't do what we do as singular.
We're trying.
We're trying.
We're figuring out, how to kind of keep ourselves connected like this and recording videos whenever anybody asks and sitting down at the piano and playing music. And so that's, for me, I joke, but I'm like, when it's acceptable, I'm going to hug people so hard. It's going to be painful.
Awesome. I love what you said about weirdos, though, Matt. It's so funny because I think I subconsciously, I ever since Matt has, because he said that a lot, and that word to me doesn't have a negative connotation. I have a little nephew who's been spending a lot of time with us recently because we're here in Pittsburgh, and I said to my mom, oh my gosh, he's such a little weirdo. She's like, don't say that. And I was like,
why?
No, Mom.
It's good.
It's a good way. He's interesting. He's creative.
Yeah.
He's
inquisitive.
He has little quirks that are really cute and funny. And I was like, I mean that in the best possible way, that he's not like a boring cookie cutter child. I love that he's like a little weirdo. And so,
well, every show that you love, every show that is a thing is about a misfit. It's about somebody, the shows that have endured Wicked and Hairspray and Book of Mormon. They're all the misfits.
Dear Evan Hansen, yeah.
Who, and we root for that person. And there's, that's an underlying theme in our business. It's an underlying theme in our childhoods, because there's a lot of outside voices that kind of creep in and tell you what you're doing is wrong or weird or not normal, and then you have to kind of in your mind be like, but I love this thing, but I'm being told not to do it. How is that right? So, and we're all guilty of doing that to somebody else, probably, damping someone else's light at some point. So
trying to censor them
so now we have to do our part to encourage that.
I think when you both were talking about how especially talking about this community and all of us especially coming around to today especially theater and the bright lights and the fun and the singing and the dancing, that drew me to theater. But I think truly one of the biggest things that drew me to theater is just the community aspect, because you can't be in this business and be someone who is all about you and someone who's like, I'm going to push my career forward and whatever, and that works in the business world and that works other places, unfortunately. But in the theater, you literally, it just doesn't work. You can't get anywhere without you supporting and getting support from others, and this give and take.
You'll find that out really quickly too. You find out really quickly, and that's why I think a lot of people don't necessarily last sometimes, is because if you don't, we say this all the time, if you don't establish a community for yourself of friends who will lift you up, you will very likely not last very long, I mean, I even think of, I couldn't help him, but I think of, a couple of months ago, Christopher Hankey, before all this ended, was like, I have an audition. Can you come downtown and watch my dog while I go into the audition? I couldn't help him do it, but like, he had to then call like 5 other people so somebody could watch Grover so he could go in and do his audition. And this is somebody who's been doing it forever, who has a successful career, and you're like, I just need you to watch my dog. Or the time when, like, Drew Gailing, they had just had their baby.
When we lived in Midtown, there were so many times
people coming
our
all
friends
the
with
time.
babies would be like, hey, I'm going to Chelsea. Can I drop my kid off for, like, half hour?
So we would play with their kids, and they go to, but that's what you do.
Yeah.
And
it's a family. I mean, it is incredible because I do feel like if we need anything, there are like 5 phone calls we can make, and within those 5 phone calls, we'll probably have someone that will be like, sure, absolutely, whatever you need. And it's, you don't really, I don't feel like you get that in all businesses and all walks of life.
When it's weird that you say that, because I never thought about the whole, you can just call people and hopefully someone will answer and say something, because when I was in New York for Broadway Dreams, my flight got canceled, and I was sitting in Come From Away when I got the notification, but obviously I didn't get it because my phone wasn't on, so I left the theater. I'm standing at the stage door to say hi to Jen, and I see that my flight's been canceled, so I'm calling my dad. I'm like, we gotta book another flight. He's like, I can book you one, but you gotta be there in 2 hours, and I'm like, no, I gotta go back to the hotel, which is like not here, and then I gotta go and I was doing all of that stuff, and I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to call people, because, we didn't necessarily want to pay another $500 for a room at the hotel, and this, that, and the other. So I'm calling you. I talked to Jen, and she was like, I would love to, but I got a jet. I called the person that I was staying with for my internship, and she was like, I don't have a space, but call Rachel. I talked to Rachel, and I was able to end up, I stayed the night at Rachel Hoffman's house for the night, and I was like, well, this is fun, because I'm going to see you in like 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it is, and especially, I feel like also New York too, it's like the city itself as well, I feel like, because everyone knows how hard it is to live in that city, and what an extraordinary city it is, but it's hard.
Yeah.
So when things like that happen, people are like, I have a couch, I got a floor, like, we'll figure this out.
Figure it out.
I was like, I'll sleep on a table, I'll just gotta find a place to stick myself for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So for those who are looking to move to join this community professionally and just for funsies, do you have any helpful hints, tips, words of I had a word there, but it's non-existent anymore.
Well, I don't want to be bleak right now, but I want to be practical and say that, this is a really tricky time. And I had somebody, a student of ours that who I've known since she was a kid, text me the other day and be like, I don't know if I'm going to come to this city. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And if she just graduated, and I basically said to her, I was like, everything's on pause. Everything is on pause. There's nothing you can do right now that nobody else can do. There's nothing you can do to get ahead like right now. It's just, so take the pause and take class if you want online and educate yourself or whatever, but like also take a break. And I think for kids right now who are like, let's be honest, the life in the career in the theater is fun. It's not necessarily glamorous, and it's not necessarily a place to make money. And you never know when you're going to have free time. You never know when you're going to have that 3 months to do that thing. We've missed more weddings and, things like that because we weren't working for 6 months. And then all of a sudden we got a job right at the time. Your best friend's getting married or your sister's having a baby or something is going on. You're like, I'm in a show. And you take that opportunity because it just happened to have come up at that moment. Right now, when nothing is happening, take the time for yourself. And, maybe this is the time to travel when things get safe. Maybe this is the time to drive across country and see your family and stay with them. Maybe this is the time when you write or the time when you take a class online and, there's all these free things going on. There's all these amazing offers that are being given out because people like us are sitting home going, I need to do something and I don't care about making money, so I'm gonna like give this thing for free or whatever. Do that. The city will be there, the industry will be there. When it comes back, it will take time to rebuild, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for people who come to New York and are like, I'm here, I want to be on Broadway too, because I bet only half of the theaters, maybe less, will be operational for a while, and just take the time that you might not get the luxury to have later on in your life when you're really full swing in your career, and you're like, I'm planning that trip, I'm planning that thing, and then nope, your plans got changed. Like, you have the time now, do those things. So I don't want to discourage people from being in this industry because even though it's difficult, there's a lot of really amazing, life-changing things that come out of a career in the theater. And if you're the person who's passionate for that, you're going to wind up finding your way here somehow. And it might just take a little longer in the aftermath of all this. It's also going to look very different. The theater is going to look very different. The industry is going to look different. Thankfully, because of Black Lives Matter, because of Me Too, like the industry is going to change. People are going to have to rethink a lot for the better. And, maybe figure out what your part is in all of that too. And how you can be a part of that in a positive way and help enact positive change.
I think, as to what Matt was just saying, I think right now everyone has the luxury of time, which I can't tell you how many times in my career when I've been doing 8 shows a week, especially, oh my gosh, my Broadway debut was Hairspray. And I remember after 4 months into that show, I had the worst shin splints because you're just ponying for your life in that show. And I was like, I just want a week for my shin splints to heal. And there's so many times I've been doing 8 shows a week on Broadway that your body is broken and your mind is like, I just need a break. I love what I do, but it's like anything, you get burned out. And so we have this incredible luxury of time. And yes, you really, as much as it would be lovely to take a trip to Europe, you really can't travel right now. And there's a lot of things you can't do. But what you can do is you can work on your craft. I'm taking online classes right now. You can take classes. You can try to better yourself. So when the industry doors are finally pushed wide open, you can be there and you can be in tip-top shape to go into rehearsal rooms, to go into those auditions and be ready. And the other thing I want to say is, if you want to be in this business, amazing. You need that training. There are the few exceptions of people who were given this God-given gift that they can show up to an audition and wow the pants off of people and be like, you're the one, and now you're in a Broadway show. It happens. I will not say that it doesn't happen, but most people that I work with and continue to work with in my career have incredible training and are disciplined and really know how important it is to have that base. And also, so once, let's say you want to be in this business and you book that job, when you do get to that rehearsal room, be the person in the rehearsal room who says yes. It's like classic improv. Say yes and. If your director says, okay, I need you to carry this from one end of the stage to the other end of the stage, and I need you to do it while singing a high speed, and also you're in this huge costume and you're twirling, don't be the person that says, actually, I don't think I can. No, say, sure, let me try it. And of course, when it happens and you fall on your face and you're like, this isn't going to happen, the director's going to see that and go, you know what? I appreciate that you're like willing to try whatever I'm going to throw at you, because I want to work with people like that. I want to work with people who are like, yeah, let's try it. And if it blows up in my face, then we all collectively know in the room that this wasn't the way to do it. It's so much more fun to be in a room with people who are like, yeah, let's try it, than people who are just constantly shooting down ideas, because that's not what we do.
Yeah. On my Instagram, have been posting, there's a highlight on my Instagram on places you can take classes, ways to help artists right now, people who are working through places like Broadway Plus, and what's it called? Beyond the Artists, I think it's called, who are doing these virtual lessons, these virtual voice lessons, master classes, group meet and greets, personal concerts through Broadway Plus. Who doesn't want a concert from like Derek Klena? I mean, come on. And they're getting that money. That is their income. So if you're wanting to check that out, head to my Instagram. It's existent.
Amazing.
Okay, so I want to chat real quick about Jersey Boys. You both did Jersey Boys. Matthew, you did it in 2007. Kirsten, you did it in 2015. I want to know, when you were in this show, did you ever think that it would still be running today? and what was your experience with Matt having done it first and then now, Kirsten doing it?
Well, our experiences were very different for a lot of reasons. And for one, was it your third Broadway show? It was Kirsten's third Broadway.
It was my fourth Broadway show. It was my fourth.
Really?
Hairspray, Follies, Big Fish, Jersey Boys.
Okay. So it was her fourth, and it was my first. And, the capacity at which the men are featured in Jersey Boys versus the women is very, very different.
Very different.
I also did it at the beginning of the run in the original company as a swing, so that everyone was coming to see the show, and it was a very hot ticket. And so, to answer your question, I absolutely thought it would still be running to this day because it's brilliant. And the book is maybe one of the best books for a jukebox musical or any musical, really. It's just really smart and really well done. It's an infectious show. It's super funny. It's incredibly well directed. Mm-hmm. The songs are contagious. And it's great. It's fast paced, and the actors talking to the audience. This is something I've realized a lot because I've done a lot of shows where my character specifically has directly addressed the audience. I have, like in American Parents as well. And there is something about, talking to the audience each night that makes them feel like they're genuinely a part of the story. And when we did Jersey Boys, and if I were playing one of those guys, because I've covered all of them, if I were on and I were talking to the audience, I could look out and see them looking back at me and nodding their head, and more often than not, responding vocally. And I thought, this is unbelievably unique and brilliant because these people feel like they're being talked directly to. Mm-hmm. And the other brilliant part about it was that toward the end of the show, the group had gone through all their trials and tribulations and had broken up, and they were in different formations and they hadn't talked to each other in years. And they reunited for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. And they had all not been seen on stage together for maybe 20 minutes. And it felt like 20 years. And the announcer, Peter Gregas playing Bob Cruz, said, and here they are, the 4 seasons. And the guys rose up from the stage from underneath. And I remember as an audience member watching it and thinking, are they really is that really them? You know what I mean? And there were people around me who genuinely thought the real 4 seasons were going to come up from under the stage. And every night, the audience cheered as if they were the real guys. So, I definitely understand why this show is still running to this day. Also, in terms of playing those roles, it's the most fun I've ever had going in and out of characters like that. And I'm from New Jersey, and I had everyone in my family come see it multiple times. And
I think I saw it like 20 times.
She at least saw it 20 times. Yeah, it was just a blast. You know, I would love actually to do it again now that I'm older. I'd love to give a shot at like Tommy DeVito again or something like that, because I was 23 and 24 when I was doing it the first time, and now I feel like I could crush
get the like
that.
weight.
Well, I always have the weight.
I mean the no, I mean like the gravitas.
I know what you mean.
You're older.
I know you mean.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it was a very different experience for me because, I mean, it's a fantastic show. Everything that Matt said is true. But the women in the show are kind of like no, that sounds terrible, but I'm going to say whatever. Like the unsung workhorses of the show.
Yeah.
I lost so much weight doing that show because you never sit down.
Yeah.
You go from, I think I had something like 17 costume changes or something crazy like that. And you don't realize, but the women open the show, and then they push the things off, and then they change, and then they come back on, and you're holding a camera, and then you run off, and you change, and then you run, and you push the car seats on, and it's so fast. And I mean, some of those quick changes were like within an inch of their lives.
Yeah.
And it was really exciting because it's one of those shows that like, you get there and you're like, okay, opening number. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. I'm tired. It's, Wednesday matinee, which always rough for me.
Yeah.
And then the music starts. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, we just finished the show. Oh, we finished the show. Okay, cool. Because you don't rest. I think there's one time that all the girls in the dressing room together and we all would like put our feet up and take a second. And I think it was, I feel like it's like act 2. Oh, the sit down.
Yeah.
It's the sit down. When all the guys were having the sit down.
With Chip DiCarlo.
And
Tommy's about to get kicked out of the group, and then Nick leaves the group. The women are nowhere to be found.
We're nowhere to be found.
10 minutes.
So we have like 10 minutes, and like that's when like the track that I did, I played Lorraine, so I was in my Lorraine thing, and so like I would have a moment to just like sit there and be like, and then as soon as you heard like there was like a slam, and then you're like, oh, okay, the sit down's over. You run back downstairs. But it was really fun. It was cool that we both got to do the show because a lot of the same people were kind of still there, which was great, and Matt was very well respected, so people liked me, which was lovely.
But we did do it 6 years apart, It
would have been cool to do it together.
It would have been cool to do it together, and we, so I made my Broadway debut on 52nd Street, and then I left Jersey Boys, and literally a month later, Kirsten made her Broadway debut on 52nd Street in Hairspray, right across the street at the Neil Simon, and then she left, and I went back into Jersey Boys. We were never there at the same
We
time.
were never on the street as I had.
But
really nice.
I always said it's a show to do, at least in my capacity, the way I did as a swing, that I had to have done it when I was young, because it required a lot of mental capacity and it required a physical energy that right now I'm like, give me the guy who just goes off stage for 45 minutes and has a scene. Like, I will stay in that show for 2 years. No, but it was the best time ever. And I always say that we've genuinely felt like rock stars, and I've never had that experience in any other capacity. So.
You mentioned how cool it would be to work together on Jersey Boys. You got to work together in American in Paris. What was it like getting to work together in that show?
We worked together before, but not on this scale. We've done symphony concerts, and we did a show together at the Good Speed Opera House that Kirsten was actually already starring in, called It's a Wonderful Life. And she was playing the lead. She was playing Mary. And then those are long runs at Good Speed. They're like 4.5 months.
Yeah.
And then about a month and a half, 2 months in, one of the actors booked another show, and he left, and they just called and said, Matt, well, you can come into the show. And I did. So we did that show together.
We did a show at La Jolla together, which was magic.
We did a show at La Jolla Playhouse together. Would become Chaplin. And so that was incredible because we were basically on vacation.
Yeah.
But when we were on tour together, it was pretty unique because we were older. We had both done
4 Broadway shows at that point.
Yeah, we'd each been in 4 Broadway shows, and we had never toured.
And we were always those people that were like, oh, I got an audition for a tour, but it would take me away from you for 6 months. So like, maybe I'll go in, and then we're always like, I don't want to. Like, we're dorks. We like each other.
And it was it was not, I won't go too into it, but it was riddled with complications in the sense that I had been up for the original production on Broadway, and I had auditioned for it like 8 times and not gotten it, and I was devastated. And then we saw the final preview on Broadway, and we loved it.
So
We were like,
beautiful.
Brandon Uranowitz, who got the role, was like brilliant. It was one of those things where you watch it and you're like, duh, obviously that guy.
Yeah.
And then the tour audition for the first national, and I went in and I thought, oh, I'm going to get it. And I didn't get it. And they offered it to Kirsten. And then like it didn't work out for her to go on the road at that time, so she had to unfortunately pass on it. And then they called me, and I went into it on Broadway. It was very complicated.
tumultuous.
So that the way this came about was really insane. And I was in London doing a play, and Kirsten was at Algonquin doing Mother in Ragtime. And I was in London. I was on a break from my rehearsal, and I walked outside my stage door, and I saw the producer of An American in Paris. And I had just closed it on Broadway, 10 months earlier. And I was like, Stewart? And he's like, I was just thinking about you and Kirsten. The tour was about to hit its year mark, and 2 of the actors were potentially leaving. And one of those actors was Itai, who had literally, they were like, we're pretty sure he's going to book Band's Visit on Broadway. we're almost 99% sure.
So
If he does, will you and Kirsten come out on tour? And we're like, yeah. And 2 days later, Itai booked it. We had offers, and we were going out on tour together. And it meant putting our entire apartment in storage. For 7 years, we'd lived in this apartment in Midtown. Everything went in storage.
And then booking a trip to Paris.
Yes,
we were like,
did.
we have because I closed Ragtime, I think at the end of August or early September. Matt was still in London doing the show, and I was like, okay, here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna fly to London. We're gonna take a trip in Europe. We like popped off to Paris, and we like looked at all the places that they talk about in the script. We did our research, and it was really magical. But it came at a time in our lives where we kind of thought like the whole national tour thing had passed us, because a lot of people right out of college go on tours because you save a ton of money.
And you're young and unattached.
And so you don't have a significant other to worry about. And you also, sometimes people worry that like you leave the city for a year and people forget about you, which is in part true, because you're in Minneapolis starring in a beautiful Broadway tour, but people are in New York and they're like very focused on like New York is the place and everything's happening in New York. And, to some degree that does kind of happen. So people get nervous about going on tour, later in their careers. And so for us, it was like, we were about to save a ton of money. We were going to see some really cool cities. We were going to do the Kennedy Center for 5 weeks over the holidays.
Toronto for 5 weeks.
It was magical.
And we had no expenses at home. Like, no expenses.
Except for our storage unit.
A couple $100 a month. And, it was just like, at that point, we're about to be married 11 years this month. At that point, we were married about 8 years, a little over 8 years when we went on tour. And there was one other married couple on tour, and they left about halfway through the run.
Don
and Lori, yeah.
Okay.
But the company was generally young, and I remember like we'd get into like a marital spat, which is totally normal. And people would be like, "Oh my God, are they okay? Are they going to get to? Is this the end? Oh my God, did you see the way he looked at her? Did you see the way she walked right back?" We're like, we've been married for 8 years. We've been together for 14 or 15 at that point. We're like, relax.
I remember before we went on tour, people who were married and had been on tour with their spouses before were like, get separate hotel rooms. Don't save the per diem. Get 2 hotel rooms. And I was like, why? And then like halfway through the tour, I was like, I understand.
Yeah.
Because I love this guy. No, I do. I love him so much. But it's so interesting when you are flying on a plane together, and then you go to the hotel together, and then you go to sound check together, and then you eat meals together, and then you go home at the end of the night after your show, and like you become those people who are like, let's go get a bite to eat, and then you're like, we have nothing to talk about, because it's like, did you hear that? Oh wait, you were there.
Yeah, you were there.
You remember that? Oh, you have nothing to talk about, because I feel like normal married couples, like they go out into the world, and then they converge upon dinner or drinks or whatever, and they're like, here's what happened in my day. I saw this, and I saw these weird things happen. But we just had none of those, like, everything was a shared experience.
The only saving grace was that our shows were very different and didn't align very much. So I was never on stage when Kirsten was on stage. She always had moments with Jerry, and I had moments with the guys or with Lise. and we shared one moment together where we sat on a chaise lounge and sang a duet in totally separate worlds. And then after that, there's a scene in a cafe, and she puts her hands on my hand at one point. We share a moment of like empathy with one another for not being the person that the love of our life chose. And that was a very cool moment to be able to share. But we never passed each other backstage. We never spoke words to each other on stage. So that was the moment where we're like, finally, we can go to work and have some time apart.
It was my alone time.
Yeah.
There were those couple cities where our stage managers or company managers were like, and we got you dressing rooms right next to each other. And I was like, no, separate us, please.
Thanks for the thought, but
Yeah, really. Stay out of it.
Stay out of it.
So, you've had the experience of working together. You did Grand Horizons, and you were in Rock of Ages at the exact same time. What was that like, getting to come home after your shows and be like, well, how was your long day?
That hadn't happened in
It hadn't happened since...
in about 12 or 13 years. The only other time Kirsten and I were ever doing shows at the same time, she was doing Hairspray when I was doing a show called A Catered Affair. And much like... and much like these two shows, Grand Horizons was always a limited run of 3 months. Rock of Ages was open-ended. Hairspray was a huge hit that wasn't going anywhere at the time, and A Catered Affair only lasted for 3 months on Broadway. So it was almost the same situation where, and I was able to like sometimes like leave early and be at her stage door and meet her. But a lot of times now that we're older and we've been married a lot longer, and when we were doing Catered Affair and Hairspray, we weren't married yet. So it was very romantic to wait at the stage door. A lot of times, like during this particular run, because it was the dead of winter, I would be like, I would go home and like make sure that there was food waiting for her or something like that. You know what I mean? But it was nice to be doing shows together, but our schedules were totally opposite because at New World Stages they have Tuesday nights off, and on Broadway you have Monday night off. So for about 14 weeks, we never shared a day off.
Which is not ideal.
Not ideal.
So we try to, make things work, but it's not ideal. And I do 2 shows Sundays, so like the great thing about a normal Broadway schedule is you get that special Sunday night. Yeah. When your shows, you get off at like 5:30, and then you have, especially in the summer, it's still light for a couple more hours. You can get like a bite to eat. Well, not right now. You can't get a bite to eat.
But I wish, thinking back on that, I wish we had done a little bit more of that, in March, February, like had some of those nights where we were like, let's just stay out and go to our favorite, wine bar or whatever, which unfortunately is now closed. We read that article like months ago.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay, well, not important now.
More on that later.
But, and now we have no idea. I mean, and my show closed on March 1st as it was always intended to close on March 1st. And Kirsten, hopefully will be returning to her show when everything kind of kicks back up. So,
which I got to see. Totally recommend. That was fun. That was a really fun time. You have worked with the Stephen Sondheim.
Screevin' Scronscrime is what we call him.
Screevin' Scronscrime.
Okay, go ahead. Would never call him that. No. Nobody calls him that to his face.
What was it like getting to work with a legend?
Well, I guess you'd have to ask him what it was like to work with me. I'm kidding. But Kirsten also did work with him on Follies.
Oh, yes.
Only about a year later after I did. And we both tell a pretty similar tale about him. So we can probably double team this, but he is, and I heard somebody say this in an interview about him. Christine Baranski said it about him in an interview the other day on Fresh Air with Terry Gross. Basically, a friend of mine while I was working with him, a friend of mine named Jim Clow, who's a really talented actor who's done a million things and worked with Sondheim a lot, was like, people often avoided him at parties or cast functions or opening nights because they're like, oh, he's so intimidating. And as a result, nobody would go up to him and just talk to him. And he just likes to talk to people. And can you imagine being the one person who's like, I'm going to go have a conversation because nobody else is going to have a conversation with this guy? And he's incredibly down to earth.
Yeah.
He's incredibly funny.
Yes.
He does everything at his power to put you at ease. So I remember one time we were running Sondheim on Sondheim. We were in these rehearsal spaces at Roundabout Theater. And James Lapine, the director, was like, so today Steve's going to come watch the run and he's going to bring Frank Rich. Now, if you don't know who Frank Rich is, Frank Rich he is now one of the foremost political writers out there. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. He writes purely about politics now. He's also the executive producer of Veep, if you've enjoyed Veep. But for a long time, Frank Rich wrote for the New York Times, was the chief critic, and his nickname was the Butcher of Broadway. Frank is a brilliant writer and a brilliant man, and he butchered a lot of Sondheim shows. But after, and they had a contentious kind of back and forth, but after some time, Sondheim and he became very good friends because they respected the conversation that would occur between them and their difference of opinion, et cetera, et cetera. So here we are, and Sondheim and Frank Rich are coming to run through, and we're all like, and they both could not have been more supportive, kinder, more genuine. A lot of things changed during the run of Sondheim and Sondheim. We had his whole canon at our disposal to build a show, and it was a review, essentially, with narration by him and video narration. So the show changed a lot. We were like, put this number in, take that number out, put this in, put that out. I was the young, new guy in the show, and a lot of my material wound up getting cut. Simply because there were a lot of celebrities in the show, and certain things had to exist in the show. And if it was a matter of me singing Love I Hear from Forum, or Barbara Cook singing, Loving You, or Buddy's Eyes, I would pick those too. But it was devastating at the time to, have material cut. And when we went and did the cast album of the show, all of my cut material was reinstated. And in fact, they took one number that was a group number from Passion that all 8 of us did, and they turned it back into a duet. And the reason I found out is because Steve wanted to reinstate all the material that he thought was kind of unfairly cut from me during that run. And he didn't have to do that. And that was incredibly generous and incredibly kind. And, I still stand in shock at the moments when I remember, like, I'd be in my dressing room. For some reason, I had my own dressing room, but I don't understand why. But I'd be in my dressing room, and, like, he'd be in the doorway to be like, hey, great show, or give me a hug, or give me notes. I remember one time on opening night, he came and hugged me, and I had a zit, so I'd put makeup on, and he hugged me, and he turned around to leave, and there was a huge makeup stain on his suit. And I was like, no, thank you. And I didn't tell him because I was so scared.
You're such an ass! Oh my God.
Somebody will tell him. Anyways.
I remember when we went up to talk to him, when I was doing Follies, it was supposed to just be at the Kennedy Center. But of course, everyone, all the fancy people in the show would tell us young ones, they're like, oh, we're moving to Broadway, don't worry. Because you don't get Bernadette Peters to do a Kennedy Center run and not intend to move to Broadway. Yeah. And at the opening night there, Matt and I went up to him, and he remembered Matt, and we had a lovely conversation. And he opens with compliments for both of us, and then it was a lovely conversation. And I will never forget this. I bent over to pick something up, and he made a comment about my butt, and he goes, "Well, this I like," and I was like, "Oh,
Screaming.
And I was like, oh my gosh, remember that forever. But he's just because everyone was so scared to talk to him, and since Matt had worked with him before, I was like, we're going to buck up and do this.
I said that to you because you were like, I don't want to bother him. I was like, Kirsten, you're one of the leads in his show. And the reason it was tough is there was a huge line of people, and he was at his table just trying to eat. And, thank you, and Frank Rich, again, was there at the table. And we were like, oh, God, we're just going to go, hi.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye.
He saw her, and he popped up. And Frank popped up. And they're like, oh! And they gave huge hugs.
They were so sweet.
And he gave Kirsten a not a compliment about her butt, although he did. He gave her a huge compliment that night about how absolutely perfect she was in the show, which she was. And, you know, those are moments where you're like, okay, I guess, you know, when you're a kid and, you know, your wall is plastered with posters and, you know, you lock your door to kind of conduct the opening 15 minutes of Titanic with a pencil and don't want anybody to walk in, or, you know, you're ponying to the Hairspray soundtrack. Like, I guess it was worth it to be the weirdo.
To be the weirdo.
You know?
It's pretty magical.
Well, that seems like a good full circle moment of this whole interview. Is there anything else that you guys want to plug right now at this moment in time?
Hidden Valley Ski Resort, a good place to be quarantined.
Yeah, that's exactly where we are. Go, you know, like, I mean, I wish we'd been watching more. We haven't been watching a lot, but the reason we haven't watched a lot of things, like in all these concerts and things that are out there, is because we've been having a lot of conversations at home with our family about what's going on right now in the world. And I want to plug conversation. I want to plug you challenging a friend and talking to a friend about, you know, the political climate and Black Lives Matter, and doing a little bit more to be a part of the solution. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to figure it out on your own, but maybe you'll be able to kind of provoke or evoke some genuine action from people. And then aside from that, I feel like there's a GoFundMe right now for Amanda Klutz and Nick and their child Elvis. And if you can go and donate, I don't know what she's going to be dealing with in terms of medical bills. He was in the hospital for 90-something days, which is just insane. And so any kind of support that could be thrown their way right now would really go a long way.
I will end up putting all of this information down in the description box below, including the GoFundMe and some other educational resources as well. I've been trying to share those out there, as well as some of the things that you guys have done, cast album, First You Dream, all of that fun stuff. So, yeah, thank you for sitting down with me.